$1,600 a day, $44,800 a rotation. Then, on April 20th, 2010, Deepwater Horizon exploded, and that number changed forever. But here's what nobody tells you about it. Senior tool pushers and subsea engineers in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea command $1,200 to $1,600 per shift. RigZone's 2024 survey confirms these are the going rate. Shifts routinely bleed past 12 hours. And contractor status means taxes, liability, and benefits land entirely on you. It was 2010, and the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig was operating 50 miles off the Louisiana coast, pushing into one of the deepest wells ever attempted in the Gulf of Mexico. The Macondo well had been showing warning signs for days. Pressure readings that didn't behave, mud returns that didn't add up. Then, the blowout preventer failed. At 9:49 p.m. on April 20th, methane gas surged up the drill column, hit the rig floor, and ignited. The explosion was visible from 40 miles away. 11 men died that night. 17 more were injured. The Deepwater Horizon burned for 36 hours before sinking to the seafloor. And that wasn't even the part that got people angry. What followed was the largest marine oil spill in United States history. 4.9 million barrels of crude released into the Gulf over 87 days. The U.S. Department of the Interior launched an investigation that completely rewrote how offshore drilling was regulated, staffed, and compensated. The Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, created directly in the aftermath, introduced sweeping new certification requirements for well control, blowout prevention, and emergency response. These weren't suggestions. They were mandates backed by federal law. Suddenly, the average roughneck, the guy who'd spent 3 years on a rig learning the job by doing it, no longer qualified to hold the positions that mattered most. Operators needed people with documented training, third-party certifications, and verifiable competency records. The pool of genuinely qualified specialists shrank overnight, while the demand for them stayed constant. Basic economics did the rest. Between 2011 and 2013, compensation for senior drilling specialists climbed steadily. Tool pushers who held well control school certifications from IADC, the International Association of Drilling Contractors, became aggressively recruited. Subsea engineers with blowout prevention credentials saw their day rates jump by as much as 30% in certain Gulf of Mexico markets. Companies were no longer just hiring warm bodies with experience. They were hiring people who could prove, on paper, that they understood exactly what had gone wrong in the Macondo well and how to stop it from happening again. Then, the oil price crashed. Between 2014 and 2016, Brent crude fell from over $100 a barrel to below $30. Rigs were stacked. Thousands of workers were laid off. Day rates compressed. The offshore industry entered one of its most brutal contractions in decades. But the crash couldn't undo what Deepwater Horizon had already set in motion. The skill gap it created didn't close during the downturn. Experienced specialists left the industry entirely rather than accept slashed rates. They found other work. They retired. They didn't come back. The clock was already ticking. The industry just couldn't hear it yet. Up to this point, the offshore labor market had been operating under the assumption that workers would always return when rates recovered. That was about to flip. Picture a rubber band stretched to its absolute limit, held there for 2 years, and then released all at once. That's what happened to offshore labor markets between 2021 and 2023. COVID-19 had hammered global energy demand in 2020, triggering another round of layoffs and rig stacking. Then the recovery came. Faster, harder, and more disruptive than almost anyone in the industry predicted. Global energy demand rebounded sharply through 2021 and into 2022. Deepwater drilling activity surged as operators rushed to bring production back online. The problem was the workforce. The experienced specialists who'd been laid off during the 2020 contraction hadn't waited around. Many had transitioned into renewables, onshore work, or entirely different industries. The ones who remained held leverage they'd never held before. Contractor day rates climbed 20 to 30% between 2021 and 2023, the steepest sustained increase in a generation, according to industry analysts tracking Gulf of Mexico and North Sea markets. Operators who'd spent years negotiating rates down were now offering premiums just to secure commitments. Some companies locked in long-term contractor agreements at rates they would have rejected as absurd 3 years earlier. Halliburton, SLB, formerly Schlumberger, and Baker Hughes all reported significant increases in contract labor costs across their offshore divisions during this period. Rig operators like Transocean and Valaris flagged crew availability as a primary operational constraint in investor communications. This wasn't posturing, it was a structural reality. The $1,600 figure that gets quoted today isn't a reward for excellence, it's the market price of scarcity. Companies are paying premium rates, not just because the work requires exceptional skill, though it does, but because the pool of people willing and qualified to do it has never been smaller relative to demand. The number is real. The generosity behind it is not. Imagine living in the same 200-meter radius for 28 consecutive days. You eat there, sleep there, work there. The horizon is water in every direction. The nearest city is a helicopter flight away. This is not a metaphor. This is a Tuesday on a deep water production platform. The standard rotation schedules, 14 days on, 14 days off, or 28 days on, 28 days off, define the offshore worker's entire relationship with time. What comes next is the part that still doesn't make sense to most people on the outside. The shift doesn't end when the shift ends. 12 hours is the official structure, but when a piece of critical equipment fails mid-operation, when a handover runs long because the incoming crew needs a full situation brief, when a drilling parameter goes unstable and requires continuous monitoring, that 12-hour shift becomes 14, 16, sometimes more. The rig itself never sleeps. Drilling machinery operates continuously, generating constant vibration and mechanical noise that penetrates every surface of the platform, including the walls of the sleeping quarters. Workers on their off hours rest in cabins that are never fully quiet and never fully still. The body adapts, but adaptation isn't the same as recovery. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, working through its National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, documented the offshore industry's fatality rate at 7 times higher than the general United States workforce. Between 2003 and 2010, 128 offshore workers died on the job. Researcher Dr. Kyla Retzer, whose work focused specifically on oil and gas extraction fatalities, identified the primary killers as fire, explosion, and equipment failure, with transportation incidents, particularly helicopter crashes, adding a layer of risk that begins before a worker even steps onto the platform. Every shift is a calculated risk. The calculation just gets normalized until it doesn't feel like one anymore. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. It accumulates across weeks of disrupted rest, compressed social contact, and sustained high-stakes alertness. Offshore workers know it by feel long before they have a name for it. A 2023 survey conducted by the RMT Union in partnership with the University of Aberdeen found that chronic fatigue, sleep disruption, and measurable mental health strain were near universal among offshore workers. Not occasional complaints, but baseline conditions for the majority of respondents. These weren't workers describing bad weeks. They were describing their normal. Everything was in place for these workers: the pay, the schedule, the plan. They just didn't know what everything was building toward inside their own minds and bodies. Jake Malloy, the RMT's offshore industry officer and one of the most prominent voices on worker welfare in the North Sea, has spoken extensively about what this life does to families. Missing a child's birthday once is manageable. Missing 4 in a row, then 8, then losing count, that's a different kind of wound. Malloy has described the emotional weight of workers who feel like guests in their own homes during their off-rotation. Present in body, but unable to fully re-engage with a life that kept moving without them. The psychological loop is self-reinforcing and brutal. Exhaustion impairs judgment. Impaired judgment on a deep-water rig increases risk. Increased risk demands heightened vigilance. Heightened vigilance deepens exhaustion. There is no clean exit from this cycle while the rotation is running. Digital communication, video calls, messages, photos, serves as a lifeline, but a limited one. Watching your child's first steps on a phone screen, 4 seconds delayed and pixelated by a satellite connection, is connection. It is not presence. In 2023, the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers updated its fatigue risk management guidance to formally recognize mental health and chronic fatigue as operational safety issues, not personal failings or lifestyle choices. It was an acknowledgement that was overdue by at least a decade. There's a list every offshore worker carries that nobody asks them to write. Birthdays, anniversaries, school performances, a parent's funeral, a child's first day of school. These events don't reschedule for a rotation. They happen, and you either witness them or you don't. The worker on a 28-day hitch doesn't get a compassionate leave clause for a missed anniversary. The schedule is the schedule. The pressure this places on relationships is not anecdotal. Research on offshore workforce populations consistently identifies relationship breakdown as one of the most significant non-physical costs of the career. The pattern is documented. Partners who manage the household alone for weeks at a time develop autonomy and routines that don't naturally accommodate a returning worker. The re-entry is jarring for everyone. Workers describe coming home after 28 days and feeling like a visitor, present in the house, absent from the rhythm of it. Long-term physical wear accumulates in ways that don't show up immediately. Occupational noise exposure on drilling platforms, sustained above 85 decibels across a full shift, produces measurable hearing loss across a career. Joint damage from working in confined spaces, on vibrating surfaces, in cold and wet conditions, compounds over years. Sleep disorders, documented extensively in offshore workforce health studies, persist even during the off-rotation, as the body struggles to reset circadian rhythms disrupted by weeks of irregular rest. The financial trap closes quietly. The pay becomes the lifestyle. The lifestyle builds obligations. The mortgage, the school fees, the standard of living that a civilian salary can't sustain. And then the pay is no longer a choice. It's a requirement. A veteran offshore medic saw it coming. She wrote in an industry health journal that the financial dependency workers develop within their first 3 years is the single greatest barrier to exit. Nobody listened. There's a rhythm to the offshore life that outsiders consistently underestimate. 14 days of total operational focus. No commute, no domestic friction, no social obligations, no distractions. Then 14 days of complete freedom, with a bank account that reflects the intensity of what just happened. For a certain kind of person, this structure isn't a burden, it becomes a drug. Most people never heard about this part, the way the on-off cycle rewires a person's relationship with time and purpose. On the rig, every hour has weight. Every decision has consequence. The camaraderie that develops among crew members working 12-hour shifts in a high-stakes, physically demanding environment is compressed and intense in a way that civilian workplaces simply cannot replicate. You eat with these people, sleep 40 feet from them, trust them with your safety. The bonds formed on a deepwater platform are not casual. Workers who spent a decade offshore and then transition to onshore careers consistently describe a disorientation that catches them off guard. The civilian world feels slow. The pay feels insulting by comparison. The stakes feel low. The sense of purpose, that specific feeling of doing something that genuinely matters, in conditions that demand everything you have, doesn't transfer to an office or a warehouse or a construction site. The financial goals are real, and they're specific. Paying off a mortgage in 5 years instead of 25. Funding a university education without debt. Building a financial position that a standard career trajectory couldn't reach in a working lifetime. These are legitimate transformations that the offshore rate makes possible. But the sunk cost psychology is equally real. The longer you stay, the higher the rate climbs with experience, and the harder it becomes to walk away from a number that justifies everything you've already given up. The career becomes its own argument for continuing. Pay attention to this next detail because it explains everything about how the offshore industry sustains itself despite everything stacked against recruitment and retention. The pipeline into offshore work is not accidental. It is deliberately constructed around financial aspiration and geographic reality. The regions that produce the highest concentration of offshore workers, coastal Louisiana, Aberdeen in Scotland, parts of Southeast Asia, share a common profile. Limited, high-wage alternatives onshore, strong trade and vocational training cultures, communities where offshore work has been normalized across generations, where a father's rig career makes a son's entry feel like inheritance rather than risk. Drilling contractors and operators have historically targeted these communities with structured apprenticeship and cadet programs. Transocean's cadet program, Valaris's graduate intake, and various operator-sponsored technical training schemes funnel young workers into entry-level rig positions, roustabouts, roughnecks, assistant drillers, where the base pay is already higher than most available local alternatives, and the career trajectory towards senior specialist rates is visible and credible. If you're wondering how that's even legal, so is everyone else. Paying rates that create this level of financial dependency while simultaneously exposing workers to fatality risks 7 times the national average sits in a regulatory gray zone that nobody in power has been eager to close. The framework covers physical safety with increasing rigor post-Deepwater Horizon. It covers psychological welfare and financial dependency far less comprehensively. The retention mechanism is elegant and brutal in equal measure. Entry-level workers get a taste of the income. The income creates lifestyle expectations. The lifestyle expectations create financial obligations. The financial obligations make exit increasingly costly. By year 3, the average offshore worker is not choosing to stay, they are staying, because the architecture of their financial life has made leaving structurally difficult. Step back far enough and the full picture comes into focus, not as a story about generous compensation, but as a story about a market responding to its own failures and fears. The $1,600 day rate is the product of layered forces. The post-Deepwater Horizon safety mandates that shrank the qualified workforce, the post-COVID demand surge that exposed just how thin that workforce had become, and the fundamental human reality that fewer people are willing to do this job than the industry needs. Companies pay this rate because the alternative is no crew at all. That's not generosity, that's arithmetic. Workers accept it because the financial compression is genuinely transformative. 14 days of work at this rate produces income that a median American salary requires 2 months to generate. For workers with clear financial goals and the psychological profile to sustain the lifestyle, the math is compelling enough to override everything else on the ledger. But the ledger doesn't balance. The RMT and University of Aberdeen data on chronic fatigue and mental health strain, the NIOSH fatality statistics showing a death rate 7 times the national workforce average, the documented patterns of relationship breakdown, hearing loss, sleep disorders, and psychological dislocation. These are real costs that the day rate doesn't erase. They accumulate, they compound. They follow workers off the rig and into the off-rotation, and into the years after the career ends. The offshore life is a transaction, written in years, not dollars. Drop a name below who needs to hear this.